Alright folks, fasten your seatbelts because we're about to take a roller coaster ride through Europe, a continent that makes even the most dramatic reality show look like a cozy afternoon nap. Picture this, Europe, a wild, untamed land. Cavemen trying to figure out how to use a wheel while dodging, okay, not dinosaurs, but maybe some really angry squirrels. You get the idea. From the ancient Romans who thought togas were the ultimate fashion statement, to medieval knights who probably spent more time polishing their armor than actually fighting. Talk about high maintenance. Europe was a place of endless possibilities and, let's be honest, some pretty hilarious mishaps. Think of Europe as that friend who's always got a wild story to tell, usually involving some combination of conquest, revolution, or an epic philosophical debate in a Parisian cafe, because why not? But hey, it's not all about the past. Europe today is like a fascinating mix of a history book and a sci-fi novel. Ancient ruins stand alongside sleek modern architecture. Talk about a mashup, and age-old traditions blend with cutting-edge technology. It's like watching a medieval knight use a smartphone. It's a continent that's constantly evolving, yet always mindful of its rich and often tumultuous past. So grab a croissant, pour yourself a glass of vino, or a pint if that's your thing, and get ready to dive into the captivating and often amusing story of Europe, a continent that never ceases to amaze and entertain. Alright, let's hit the rewind button to a time before iPhones, before Netflix, and yes, even before the invention of pants, probably. Welcome to prehistoric Europe, where woolly mammoths were the original SUVs and humans were just starting to figure out this whole civilization thing. Let's kick things off with the Paleolithic period, or the Old Stone Age, where our ancestors were basically the ultimate hipsters. They lived off the land, hunting and gathering and creating some seriously impressive cave art in their spare time. Talk about multitasking. Think of them as the original influencers, just without the Instagram followers. No filter needed. Then came the Neolithic Revolution, which is a fancy way of saying humans finally figured out that planting stuff was way more efficient than chasing after it. Genius, right? This led to agriculture, permanent settlements, and the eventual rise of those early European hotspots you might have heard of, like, civilization. This period was basically humanity's startup phase, full of trial and error, but eventually leading to some pretty impressive results. Think of it as the original Shark Tank. They invented the wheel, developed pottery, and even started dabbling in a bit of early architecture. Move over, HGTV. Who knew mud bricks could be so stylish? Talk about an ancient home makeover. Next up, we've got classical antiquity, a period that gave us democracy, philosophy, and enough marble statues to fill a museum or two, or 1,000. Seriously, they were obsessed with marble. This was the era of the Greeks and the Romans, and boy did they know how to make an entrance. Think of them as the original drama queens. The Greeks, with their love of democracy, well, at least for some, philosophy and drama, basically invented Western civilization as we know it. They were the original overachievers. They gave us Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and a whole bunch of other guys who probably wouldn't shut up about the meaning of life. Imagine a never-ending TED Talk. Then came the Romans, who were all about conquering, building, and making sure everyone knew who was boss. They were like the ultimate control freaks. They built roads, aqueducts, and public baths, and they weren't afraid to use a little force, okay, a lot of force, to spread their empire and their ideas. Talk about aggressive marketing. This era was a time of incredible intellectual and cultural flourishing, but it wasn't all sunshine and togas. There were plenty of toga malfunctions. There were wars, power struggles, and the occasional emperor who was a bit too fond of grapes and orgies. Let's just say, some emperors knew how to party. But hey, nobody's perfect, right? Even the ancients had their off days. Fast forward a few centuries and we find ourselves in medieval Europe, a period often depicted as a bit of a downer. But hey, it wasn't all doom and gloom. Think knights in shining armor, sprawling castles, and the occasional plague outbreak. Just your typical medieval Tuesday. It wasn't all bad, but it definitely had its moments. Like when you finally get a seat at the medieval feast and realize it's all turnips. The big cheese in town during this period was the Catholic Church, which wielded immense power and influence. Think of it as the medieval version of a social media influencer, but with more stained glass and fewer selfies. The church was the original influencer, just with more stained glass windows and less thirst for online validation. And a lot more Latin. Feudalism was all the rage, a system where lords granted land to vassals in exchange for loyalty and military service. Basically, it was like medieval LinkedIn, but with more swords and fewer endorsements. It was basically a giant game of medieval SimCity, but with more swords and fewer cheat codes. And no undo button. And let's not forget the Crusades, a series of religious wars that saw European knights heading east to, well, that part's a bit complicated. Think of it as the ultimate medieval road trip, but with more fighting and less sightseeing. Let's just say it involved a lot of fighting, religious zeal, and some questionable decisions on all sides. Kind of like a medieval reality TV show, but with more chainmail. Section 5, Renaissance, Europe's reboot. After all that medieval drama, Europe was ready for a makeover, and boy did it get one with the Renaissance. Think of it as Europe's version of a glow-up. Imagine Europe going through a midlife crisis, but instead of splurging on a sports car, they rediscovered art, literature, and the joys of human anatomy. Talk about a classy crisis. The Renaissance was like a throwback party, reviving the classical vibes of ancient Greece and Rome, but with a fresh modern twist. Think toga party, but with more sophistication. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael were basically the rock stars of their time, creating masterpieces left and right. Meanwhile, writers like Shakespeare and Machiavelli were busy redefining literature and political thought. They were the original influencers. This was a time of incredible intellectual and artistic ferment, like a giant brainstorming session that lasted for centuries. It was a period that gave birth to new ideas about art, science, and the nature of humanity itself. Basically, Europe was having an epic aha moment. It was like Europe had finally woken up from a long nap and decided to get its act together. And boy did it ever! Section 6. Exploration, Reformation, and Reason, Early Modern Europe. Buckle up because this ride's about to get wild. Hold on to your hats, folks, because things are about to get really interesting. Seriously, you might want to glue them down. We're now entering early modern Europe, a period of exploration, religious upheaval, and some serious scientific breakthroughs. Think of it as the original reality TV show. First up, we've got the Age of Exploration, a time when European explorers set sail to discover new lands, seek their fortune, and maybe, just maybe, find a shorter route to the spice markets. Spoiler alert, they got a bit lost. This era saw the discovery of the Americas, the rise of global trade, and unfortunately, the beginning of European colonialism. Not exactly a highlight reel. Then came the Protestant Reformation, which was basically Martin Luther's way of saying, "Hey, Catholic Church, we need to talk." And by talk, I mean nail a list of complaints to your door. This religious revolution led to the rise of Protestantism, a whole lot of religious debate, and more than a few wars. Because nothing says "let's discuss" like a good old-fashioned war. And let's not forget the scientific revolution, a time when thinkers like Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton were rocking the scientific boat with their radical new ideas about the universe. They were basically the rock stars of their time. They challenged the old ways of thinking and paved the way for modern science. So, next time you use your smartphone, give a little nod to these guys. Section 7. Revolution and Empire, Europe's turbulent 18th century. Buckle up, because the 18th century in Europe was like a roller coaster ride with no seatbelts, full of revolutions, empires, and enough political drama to rival a soap opera. This was a time when old orders were given the boot, new ideas were the new black, and the map of Europe was redrawn more times than a toddler's doodle. First up, we've got the Enlightenment, a philosophical movement that was all about reason, individual liberty, and those three little words that would change the world: liberté, égalité, fraternité. Think of it as the original live, laugh, love. Then came the French Revolution, which was basically the Enlightenment's way of saying, "Okay, monarchy, it's not you, it's us. Actually, no, it's definitely you." Heads literally rolled, the Bastille was stormed like it was Black Friday, and France was forever changed, and so was the rest of Europe. And let's not forget Napoleon Bonaparte, the ambitious little guy, who decided to play Risk with real countries and almost won before meeting his Waterloo, literally. He was like the Beyoncé of his time, only with fewer catchy tunes and more cannons. Section 8. Industrial Revolution, Europe's engine of change. Buckle up, folks. Get ready to hear the clang of machinery and the hiss of steam engines. It's going to be a wild ride. We're diving into the Industrial Revolution, where Europe went from moo to vroom in no time. It all kicked off in Britain, thanks to inventors like James Watt and Eli Whitney, who were basically the rock stars of their time. Move over, Beethoven. Factories popped up like mushrooms after rain, cities grew faster than your to-do list, and people flocked to urban centers hoping for a job and maybe a slightly better life. Or at least a decent cup of tea. But hold your horses, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The Industrial Revolution also brought pollution, harsh working conditions, and enough social upheaval to make your head spin. Talk about a plot twist, yet it laid the foundation for the modern world we live in today. So next time you enjoy a gadget, thank those old steam engines. Section 9. A century of upheaval, Europe in the 19th and 20th centuries. Buckle up folks, it's going to be a bumpy ride. The 19th and 20th centuries were like Europe's awkward teenage years, full of intense change and a lot of drama. Picture this: nationalism, imperialism, and two world wars that were as welcome as a skunk at a garden party. The 19th century saw the rise of nationalism, like a teenager discovering their favorite band and plastering posters all over their room. This led to the unification of Italy and Germany. Think of it as the ultimate group project. European powers decided to play a game of who can grab the most land in Africa and Asia. Spoiler alert, it wasn't pretty. This period saw colonies being treated like the world's worst summer camp, brutal and exploitative. The 20th century kicked off with World War I, a global conflict that was about as fun as a root canal. Millions of casualties later, everyone agreed it was a terrible idea. Then came World War II, featuring the rise of Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. Definitely not a highlight reel. This dark chapter left Europe and the world with more scars than a catfight at a knitting club. Section 10. A new Europe emerges post-World War II and beyond. Buckle up folks, it's going to be a wild ride. After the devastation of World War II, Europe was in ruins, both physically and emotionally. It was like the world's worst hangover. But from the ashes of war, a new Europe began to emerge, one determined to rebuild and forge a more peaceful and prosperous future. Think of it as the ultimate home makeover show. The Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, divided Europe into two blocks, the capitalist West and the communist East. It was like a really awkward family reunion. This ideological divide led to the construction of the Berlin Wall, a potent symbol of the Iron Curtain that separated Eastern and Western Europe. Talk about a serious case of you stay on your side, I'll stay on mine. But despite the tensions and divisions of the Cold War, there were also glimmers of hope, like finding a chocolate bar in your sock drawer. The European Economic Community, the precursor to the European Union, was established in 1957, laying the groundwork for economic integration and cooperation between European nations. Think of it as the original "let's split the bill" agreement. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the subsequent collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new era for Europe. It was like the ultimate "we're back together" party. Germany was reunified, former communist countries transitioned to democracy, and the prospect of a united and peaceful Europe seemed closer than ever before. Finally, Europe was ready to throw the biggest block party in history. Europe today, challenges and opportunities in a changing world. Or as we like to call it, Europe, the ultimate reality show. Europe is a continent of contrasts, where ancient history meets modern innovation. It's like watching a medieval knight trying to use a smartphone. The European Union has brought peace and prosperity, but faces economic disparities and populism. It's like a family reunion where everyone argues over who gets the last piece of cake. Diversity is Europe's strength, yet it presents integration challenges. Think of it as a giant potluck where everyone brings their own unique dish, but no one knows what to do with the lutefisk. Climate change, economic inequality, and technology are key issues. It's like juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. Despite challenges, there's resilience and a determination to build a better future. Because if there's one thing Europeans know, it's how to turn lemons into limoncello.